This week, I've been, with everything going on in the world and everything happening in our economy and all the things that we've been hearing about and reading about, I've been trying to look for people who could be models, people who I could follow, who've lived somehow with integrity and purpose and a real sense of what's important in desperate circumstances and in times of deprivation in the past. My mind drifted back for a while to the Holocaust memorial statues that I saw one time in Quincy Market in Boston. It's made up of 6 pillars that rise 25 feet in the air. They are square pillars that are clear, they're see-through, and they're placed on top of what look like sewer grates so that in cold weather you can see this sort of steam or smoke looking like it's rising up through these tall pillars. Now, inscribed on 5 of those pillars, there are stories of the cruelty of the concentration camps in World War II, stories of women and children and elderly people who've been gassed and burned to death. But on the 6th pillar, there is a very different kind of story. Rosalind and Ben Zander tell about it in their book, The Art of Possibility. They describe it like this. The 6th pillar presents a tale about a little girl named Ilsa, a childhood friend of Gerda Weissman Klein in the concentration camps in Auschwitz. You just imagine these 2 little girls living in that horror, trying to figure out what is going on. Now, Gerda remembers that one morning, Ilsa, who was about 6 years old at the time, found a single raspberry somewhere in the camp. Now, Ilsa carried it all day long in a protected place in her pocket. And in the evening, with her eyes shining with happiness, she presented it to her friend Gerda on a leaf. Now, imagine a world, Gerda writes, in which your entire possession is one raspberry, and you give it to your friend. This story has haunted me since I first saw it and read about it. I tried to imagine being that little girl, finding a raspberry in that God-forsaken camp. You know, I imagine she hadn't tasted anything sweet in a long, long time, and she had to wonder if she would ever taste anything sweet like a fresh piece of fruit or a piece of candy ever again. I imagine myself in that situation, and I wonder what I might have done. I think I could see myself finding a quiet little place off by myself, closing my eyes and sucking every last bit of juice and sweetness out of that little raspberry. Because in a place like that, such pleasures, such sensual pleasures must have been far and few between, rather unheard of, in fact. But Ilsa did something much more profound. She knew that she could have had that treat for herself, but she opted to do something much more fulfilling, much more satisfying. She gave it away. Now, for Ilsa's friend Gerda, having received that raspberry from her friend must have meant so much. It must have meant so much to Ilsa to bring her friend such joy and such surprise. Now, more than that, it was an expression of love, that an act that must have deepened what was already a very meaningful friendship and connection. The satisfaction that Ilsa received from giving that raspberry was so much richer, so much deeper, and so much fuller than if she would have eaten it for herself. I wish that all of us could learn the lesson of Ilsa. You know, this story helped me one time when my wife Anitra heard about a natural cleansing diet that she wanted to try, in which she would have to give up all sugar and anything with sugar in it and alcohol of all kinds, and it was this major cleansing diet, and for at least 6 weeks. Now, it was just before Thanksgiving. that she hears about this diet, and she plans to start it right away. Anitra, you have to understand, she especially loves sweets. So at this time, she asked if I would support her by doing it with her. She couldn't imagine how she could possibly give up all sweets while I'm sitting there eating ice cream and cookies and maybe having a little glass of wine on a holiday. So, to which I told her, honey, I love you very dearly. But I really don't want to go through all the holidays from Thanksgiving through Christmas with no sweets, not a glass of wine, nothing. And as some of you know, I practically wait all year for our church organist Donna's fantastic Christmas rum cake, which, as you know, has both sugar and alcohol, and is out of this world. However, I told Anitra that if she would wait till the new year, after all the holidays and all the parties and all the events, that I would do what I could. I would help her, and I would go along with her. I didn't think much of it after that. Donna, of course, came through with fantastic rum cake, as always. And then January rolled around, and Anitra reminded me of this insane, I meant to say rather gracious offer of mine. And so initially, I tried really hard to kind of weasel out of it. I had a lot of excuses about things happening at the church and events that I was going to be going to. But eventually, I decided to stick with my word, though somewhat begrudgingly. And then I read this story about Ilsa. And it hit me right between the eyes. I realized that the sensual pleasures, any sensual pleasures that I might have experienced through sweets or alcohol over that 6 weeks were nothing, really nothing, in comparison to the deeper bond of appreciation and affection and the connection that developed between me and Anitra as we went through this trial together. And as I supported her in this way. So although it seems like a small thing, it really was a very important lesson for me in what's important. It helped me go from being a reluctant giver to being one who takes pleasure in being able to give, to be able to have something that I can give to someone else. Viktor Frankl, who was also in the concentration camps, in the Nazi concentration camps, he writes in his book, A Man's Search for Meaning, "We who lived in the camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few and far between, but they offer a sufficient proof that everything can be taken away from a person but one thing. The last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in whatever circumstances, to choose one's own way." It reminds me of another story that Benjamin Zander tells about his father, who ended up in a refugee camp, a very unpleasant place, as it sounds like, at the end of World War II. And he remembered that some of the men, older men and people of various ages, emaciated, having gone through everything that was happening in the war in Europe, and he remembers that first thing in the morning, some of these men would just go right to the chain link fence at the perimeter of the camp, and they would just stand there and just stare out. Just blank stare for hours. Now, Ben's father started to get to know various people in the camps, and he realized that there were some very accomplished people. There were some amazing professors and doctors and people of all kinds of interests and professions. So one day, they decided to set up a university right there in the camp. Now, before long, they had 40 classes on various subjects.